Is Tuesday, the 2nd of September, and we are here at the Gateway truck stop at 5301, and we are talking with who?
Victor Trevino.
Thanks for your time, Victor Trevino. We come here because we saw a video surveillance footage of a man being shot several times by police officers, and our listeners are looking for context. What really happened, and what can you tell us?
Well, I can only tell you what basically, the video surveillance and what eyewitness testimony basically had gathered during the night of, that was Saturday morning at 1:50 p.m. This was an individual that came and sat down at the couch in front of the building and basically had a bottle of wine, and he sat down and he fell asleep, but he had purchased what appeared to be a BB gun at Walmart. One of my gate guards approached him and asked him if he could put away that, because he recognized it was a BB gun because of the cartridges, and he told him to put it away. I guess somebody called the police. When the police arrived, my gate guard informed the police that it was a BB gun. That, hey, not to take it as a real gun, it was a BB gun. Told several of the officers. What appears from the surveillance is that the individual was sitting down, and he woke up after several commands because he had headphones on and he was asleep. As he stood up, the police officers began firing.
So, let me be clear. The arriving police officers had prior knowledge that this was not a real gun. It was a BB gun.
Yes, because initially the police weren't called. Somebody, the gate guard saw him with what appeared to be a gun, but he saw it in a bag. He says, "Hey, is that a real gun?" And the individual answered, "Hey, no, it's not. It's a BB gun. I bought it." He said, "Let me see it." He's like, "Okay, put it away. You can't have that out. If you're gonna have it out, you have to leave, and you can't have that bottle of wine here either." So the individual complied, and he just fell asleep. Probably half an hour, 45 minutes later, the police show up because they were called, and the individual was still asleep on the seat where he was at, and I guess they were giving him commands. At that time, the gate guard was basically going around saying that it was just a BB gun. So that's where kind of, one of the first question of the whole series of questions were raised. When did police officers know that, or if they had the information to know that if it was a BB gun?
What other questions has it raised for this local community?
Well, I think overall it's a national question on not only, when do police get called, which, a reasonable person can say, well, okay, the police were called. The second question is, what type of approach or assessment do they make when it's an individual that they believe is armed? Do they bring the amount of police they brought in? There was probably over 20 squad cars here, and some of the police officers were armed with AR-15s. Those are, I don't know if you know, those used to be military weapons, and they became civilian use now. And the third question is the use of force. What kind of force? I mean, we live in a modern society where taser guns exist, where neutralizing an individual, it should be the initial goal, and sometimes that's not exercised, and they go to option B, which is using deadly force, which they did use. And then the amount of deadly force is a third question. How much deadly force should be used? Is this person basically executable on the spot because he appears to have a gun, or should he be neutralized to face trial and be sentenced at a later date?
On this video, sir, one of the things that really caused outrage was that even after the fact that the person was shot, riddled with bullets, the officers could be seen congratulating each other with a fist bump and taking a picture with their cell phone. How do you receive that? What do you think of that?
Well, my personal opinion, and I've been practicing law for 13 years, I think that's unprofessional. I think police officers have the faith of the community because they are supposed to follow the process more than anybody else. They're supposed to exercise patience, professionalism, and the way they handle things, they have to handle them objectively. I felt that those two individuals that fist pumped, I thought that was very unprofessional. I feel that that's clearly an issue for internal affairs to deal with, because that basically destroys the entire credibility of what's going on. And this is a serious situation because there's a dead person in front of them. And, you know, that's somebody's brother, somebody's son. And I think that's where the community became outraged.
Sir, can you please tell us a little bit more about your background? Because our listeners and viewers would like to know. I know you're a qualified character since you've already mentioned your experience in law, but can you please specify for us, what do you really have in experience? What's your experience with law?
Well, you know, I represent the company. I'm the CFO, and I'm also an attorney, like I mentioned. I mean, I've been an attorney for 13 years. You know, I'm a local boy from Laredo, so I understand the culture and community. At the same time, you know, I practiced most of my legal practice in Chicago before coming back. Ultimately, you know, municipalities and how governance takes place is it's in conjunction with fair processes in place. In a city like Laredo, not as large as Chicago, that's even more so because the people know each other, and you know, they've lived here most of their lives. The problem here is whenever you have a process, whenever you call somebody to the scene, specifically the police department, you expect them to basically execute the law. And the law basically says that everybody is innocent until proven guilty. And they're not judged on the street. They're judged in a courtroom, before a judge, before a process, and then they're sentenced. That's the law. So the decision of 1, 2, 3, maybe all the officers to use deadly force is one which basically weighed that entire process, and they chose to use deadly force. So I think from a legal standpoint, I mean, the question raises again, when is deadly force valid, a valid option? And two, how much deadly force should be used? I mean, as you know, the Mike Brown situation in Ferguson raises those issues. Very similar. The body was left there for hours. This body was left there for 4 hours. You know, there's something to be said about how many bullets does it take to kill someone. There was also several bullets shot, more than 80 rounds shot, with people inside the building, and with no forewarning that this was happening. People were on the ground crawling their way to safety. All these things have not been reported in the media because, I mean, as an owner, you know, because your customers tell you. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, just does not sound like the process worked.
So let me clarify, because you've said a lot of very interesting, important things that I agree with, but I want to make sure that I don't go over it. So you're telling me that even your customers were telling you that they hit the ground when they heard the bullets. Is that true?
That's correct.
Wow. That is something that has grown in concern with us, because one of our listeners has mentioned, well, how can they be trained so poorly? They shot so haphazardly and they put a lot of people in danger. And that is really, really something that we need to ask the Laredo Police Department. What will they say to justify those actions? And to follow up with what you said, it is a national crisis. The militarization of police has gone too far. But I want to leave the public with your thoughts. What would you say to our community? Since you're one of the residents in Laredo that has lived here and knows the culture, what can you tell us?
Well, in general, I would say to the community that, you know, you have to have faith in the process. However, we have to have the process accountable. And in conjunction with internal affairs, there should be community involvement as to what actually happened that night, what led up to the event, and whether the remedy or the solution to basically the reason they were called for was adequate, or was it overboard. I think all those things are very essential because, you know, at any given time, we could be a Mike Brown.